I've heard it said many, many times that I want to leave my kids an inheritance. I want to leave my kids better off than I was. I want my kids to do better than I did. I want my kids to be more successful than me. So while that is very good at heart, I want us to really parse what that means, because most people look at that in terms of material wealth, material success, worldly success, physical inheritance. But I don't think we all fully comprehend what that means. So I'd like to start with this idea of what exactly is the inheritance you want to leave to your children. The Bible under Proverbs 13:22, I want to make sure I say the right one. 13:22 says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. What does that mean to the poor people? What does that mean to the single mom who is living off of welfare and can barely put food on her kid's table? Does that mean that she's not a good mom or a good dad because they can't provide their children a financial inheritance? Not at all. One of the things we have to remember is that and I'm going to kind of touch this spiritually as well as materially, material wealth breeds comfort. And comfort actually pulls us further from God than closer to God. When we have to struggle, and most of you, that people who I've talked with, interacted with, when we struggle, that is when we are closest to God. When our spouse has left us and we beg God for their return, when a child is sick or dies, we're drawing near to God. When anything, health problems, finances, trauma, we pull closer to God. Now, God doesn't want any difficulties, not in his perfect will, but in his permissive will. And because he's given us all free will, he allows those things. But why does he allow them? For various reasons, of course. But what God wants is to be intimately close with you. And what God wants to do is draw us as close to him as possible, then by doing the things that are necessary, or allowing the things that are necessary to have that intimate relationship with him. And ultimately, it's about just getting to heaven. And if thinking about this in a material way, let's kind of parse this. I never went to college. I want my kids to go to college. Okay, that's not a bad wish, and it's not even unnoble. But what if college makes your kids so successful, so financially affluent, that they forget about God, that they think they did it themselves? I talked to a very wealthy doctor once. My daughter was a cheerleader. We were at a cheerleading competition together, and something he said, he's like, I did this. I work hard and I've given my kids all of this. And I remember shuddering inside, thinking the way he totally credited it himself with all the good that he had and the provision he was giving his children, and he had no provision for God, kind of scared me, because I thought, you're not giving your children what you need to be giving them. So many of us are like, I made it to high school, I want my kids to make it to college. Well, colleges are indoctrinating kids these days. I've taught at university for over a decade. And I have come to realize if my kids don't want to go to college, my grandchildren, I'm okay with that. I am actually at a point where I'm thinking maybe you shouldn't go, because what you're getting there is not going to draw you closer to God for the most part, but tear you further away. A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. What inheritance do you want to give them? Do you want to give them the inheritance of looking at success as measured by your education, and something that pulls you so close to materialism and further away from God? Is that the inheritance you want to give them? Do not think that anything I'm saying is to not give your children anything. But when we understand that people who have the least are the ones who lean on God the most, and the inheritance, the singular inheritance you should want to give your children is simply this: I want you kids to get to heaven. I want you to do better than me in offending God less. I want you to learn from my mistakes. I want you to learn from my successes. And if this means that you don't go to college because your grades weren't good enough, but you have to work by the sweat of your brow, then that's the inheritance I want to leave you. If you have money in your account and you're struggling and you're not letting yourself go on vacations and you're holding back just so that you can leave your children $500,000, how is that biblical? How is that good for your children? I worked in the banking industry, credit unions, for over a decade. And I had one too many young adult children come in with mom or dad and try to manipulate them into, oh, why don't you invest here in this thing that would be better for the child than here in this thing that would be better for the current parents living? I remember there was one woman saying, well, I really need a refrigerator. I really need this. I really need that. And she was afraid of buying something a little nicer because she wanted to leave the money. And she had her very greedy grandson there with her. I remember being so angry because he just wanted, and she was 90 years old, by the way, still worked at McDonald's because she had to. And her kids were so concerned, well, this particular grandchild, about what he'd be leaving for her. I was angry about that. I've seen some where their parents had very, very many dollars in their accounts, and those children were trying to, have mom invest long term. Long term. Likely your parents are going to die within 10 years based on the age they were. Let them invest short term and start spending. Oh, I'm getting heated, and you can tell. The fact that the parents had money in several of these incidences made the children focus more on the money. That's not the kind of inheritance God wanted, because I didn't see any Christ-like behaviors in those young adults that were in that credit union office with me. But again, this is not just about money. Do you teach your children to struggle? Do you teach them the value of struggle? Do you pull back when you could provide? I know you don't necessarily think that's good for your kids, but think of the things that you have grown the most from. And usually it's from lack and not from abundance. Because when we have abundance, we tend to, hey, thanks God, and move on, or not thank God at all. When we have lack, we lean into God. And as we age, just talked to my mom recently. She's like, for Mother's Day, do not send me any material things. I'm trying to get rid of stuff. I'm only 58 and I'm trying to get rid of stuff. As we age, we realize stuff is just stuff. I think a lot of you have realized that. I don't really need to give my kids stuff per se, but I want you to focus on the things like the jobs, the hustle and bustle, the high pace. I had my children work so hard in grade school so they could get into a good high school. I put them through a Catholic high school, which I paid a lot of money for so they could get into a great college. And then they got in great college so they could get a great job. And even though I was going to church and focusing on God, I, again, am not so focused on, what? If you get a diploma and you barely get out of high school, but you love God and you go out and you serve the world and you're working a mission and you're praying, and you and your spouse can't take your kids on fancy vacations, or you've kept yourself open to God and you've had 3, 4, 5, 7 kids because you want to provide for them love of God. You want to provide for them a vocation that shows them how to be good citizens. How many times are people with big families mocked? Oh, just get past that. How many of us say, I only want 1 or 2 kids so I can provide? Why? Provide what? Material wealth? Now, I fell for that too. Don't get me wrong. Oh, do not think that I'm judging you. Most of the time I say stuff because I lived it. But I want to be able to give my kids. I want you to be aware that giving your kids is absolutely and statistically what pulls your kids further away from God. Look at the Little House on the Prairie. Look at the Waltons. They couldn't provide as much, but they had such richness of family. If you and your family can't afford vacations, but you camp out in your backyard, you play board games, you're on your knees together, you pray the rosary, I dare say that is making your children successful. And that is the kind of inheritance you want to pass on to your children and your children's children. Think about it. Pray on it. Ask the Lord to help you kind of curb yourself. I was the worst. I just wanted to get my kids nice presents for Christmas. I wanted to get as many as I could. And my girls are good. Love my girls. But I want them to be closer to God. And it's funny, both of them have gone through a season of darkness. That's when they lean into him more. And I've had to sit back and say my own prayers as I watch them struggle. And guess what? Brings me closer to God too. So that's the message I wanted to deliver you today. Go to the Bible. Ask the Lord about the inheritance he wants you to leave your children. Ponder it. Ponder all the verses he has. And then ask him for the grace to pull back, to provide less, to maybe not take that promotion at that job if it's going to make you be away from your family more often. Ask God if he'd rather you just be home. I think the answers you're going to get are going to surprise you. I think most of us just need discipline, especially those of us watching this from America. This is the land of great abundance, the land that God blessed so richly when our forefathers founded it in his name. We have so much abundance. It's so hard to live with lack. I've been to Africa, both Tanzania and Uganda. They have nothing. They didn't have a change of shoes. They had one pair of shoes. They had one, what you call it, an outfit, something they wrapped around them. Very few choices of clothing. They eat meat on special occasions. And yet, they loved God so much. You go to Uganda, everything is God, 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 God. Because they didn't have the distractions of wealth. They had to lean into him for food each day. I think everybody should have a trip there, or a trip to one of the countries where they need so much. You see the material wealth not there, and something inside your heart bursts because you see what's really important. So yes, just like you, I want my kids to be successful. To say I want them more successful than me, I want us both to get to heaven. That's the ultimate success right there. But I do hope that the inheritance I leave my children is please sin less, offend God less, love him more than I did. And hopefully, if and when that happens, God credits me something for having at least tried to pass on that kind of an inheritance. Tell me your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you're passing on. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. This is Breakfast with Bacon. Remind you always to live your life sunny side up.